My name is Jasmine Marie Henderson. I'm 27 years old, and I'm speaking to you from a small apartment in Philadelphia, a space that is filled with two things that most people would never understand the significance of: a framed photograph of my parents, and a memory I have carried for 18 years, a bird tattoo on an ankle, burned into my mind with the clarity that only trauma can create. If you are listening to this, I want to tell you something that took me almost 2 decades to accept. Sometimes justice doesn't come quickly. Sometimes it requires patience. Sometimes it requires you to become someone you never thought you'd have to be. But more importantly, I want to tell you this: if someone takes everything from you, if they steal the people you love most, you don't have to become like them to find the truth. You just have to be willing to wait, to watch, and to remember. So let me start at the beginning. Not the night my life ended, but the years before it. Because understanding what I lost is the only way to understand what I did to get justice. My family was ordinary in the way that only the most precious things are ordinary. My father, David Henderson, was a high school history teacher in Philadelphia. He was the kind of teacher that students would talk about 30 years later, not because he was flashy, but because he made them understand that history wasn't just facts. It was stories, it was people, it was consequences. Every action ripples forward, he used to tell me. You do something today and it affects tomorrow. He wasn't wealthy, teachers never are, but he was rich in ways that matter. My mother, Angela Henderson, was a nurse at Pennsylvania Hospital. She worked double shifts sometimes, she came home exhausted, and she still found energy to braid my hair, help me with homework, make sure I knew I was loved. Take care of people, she used to say, and people will take care of you. I was their only child, 9 years old, the center of their universe. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. My parents didn't teach me through lectures, they taught me through living. The first value was trust in humanity. Believe in people, be kind, assume the best until someone shows you the worst. My mother would leave food on the porch for homeless people. My father would tutor students for free if they couldn't afford help. The second value was safety through awareness. Not fear, not paranoia, just awareness. Know where the exits are, notice the details, pay attention to the small things. My father would check the locks before bed, not obsessively, just habitually, like brushing his teeth. The third value was resilience. Life will break you, that's not a question. The question is what you do after. I didn't fully understand this value when I was 9, but I would come to understand it better than anyone. I remember everything about that night. The smell of my mother's cooking, she had made my favorite, jerk chicken with rice and peas. The sound of my father laughing at something on television. The feeling of my mother braiding my hair in the living room while my father read the newspaper. "Bedtime, baby," my mother said when she finished. I didn't want to go to bed. I wanted to stay there forever in that moment. If I had known it was my last night as a child with my parents, I would have paid more attention. But children don't know. Children think tomorrow is guaranteed. What a cruel lie that is. I was already in bed when I heard the noise, a window breaking, the sound of glass hitting the floor. My first thought was that it was an accident, that my father would go check on it, but then I heard my mother's voice, sharp and afraid. "David, someone's in the house." And everything that happened after that was like a nightmare, except nightmares are supposed to end when you wake up. I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. I heard my father say something, his voice level and calm, even though I could hear the fear underneath. "Please, we don't have much, take what you want." And I heard a voice, a man's voice, say something I couldn't quite make out. Then my mother screamed, and my entire body went into a state of animal panic. I didn't think, I didn't reason, I just moved. I slipped out of my bed, I went to my parents' room, the room where I sometimes slept when I was scared, and I crawled under their bed. The space was tight, cramped, dust got in my nose, but I pulled myself back as far as I could go, and I froze. I was holding my breath so hard it felt like my chest was going to explode. I heard him coming to the room, his footsteps, his breathing. I could see his feet from where I was under the bed. He was wearing sneakers, dark ones, and socks, white socks with a pattern on them, and on his ankle, right above the sock line, there was a mark, a tattoo. It was a bird, sharp, black, wings spread like it was flying. I stared at it because it was the only thing my mind could focus on, because if I focused on that bird, I didn't have to focus on what was happening in this room. I didn't have to focus on my mother's voice pleading. I didn't have to focus on my father telling her it would be okay, it would be okay, it would be okay. I focused on the bird. That bird became the only evidence I had. That bird became my promise to remember. When it was over, there was silence, not peaceful silence, the kind of silence that is heavier than any sound. I stayed under that bed until my body started shaking so hard I couldn't control it, until my bladder gave out from fear, until I wasn't sure if I was still alive or if I had somehow died along with them. And then I heard the man leave, footsteps moving away, a window being opened and closed, and then nothing.
I don't remember calling 911, but I must have. I must have found the phone, I must have dialed, I must have told someone what happened, because paramedics came, police came, neighbors came, and suddenly my small, safe home was full of strangers. Everyone was speaking in low voices. Everyone was looking at me with pity that made my stomach turn. I remember the caskets. I remember my mother's hands, the hands that had braided my hair just hours earlier, folded across her chest. I remember thinking that she looked like she was sleeping. I remember thinking that was a merciful lie. My parents' best friends, Robert and Michelle Washington, took me in without hesitation. They had always wanted children. They had never been able to have them. "You're ours now," Michelle told me the first night, as she tucked me into a strange bed in a strange house. And slowly, over months and years, they became my parents. Not my first parents, but my parents nonetheless. I couldn't describe the man's face to the police. I had been under the bed. I had only seen his feet. The tattoo, I kept saying. He had a bird tattoo on his ankle, a bird with wings spread, like it was flying. The police took notes, but I could see in their eyes that they thought I was just a traumatized child, that a tattoo, visible on his ankle, anyone could have gotten it, wasn't going to be enough to find him. "We'll look into it," they said, and then the case went cold. Years passed. I grew up with a photograph of my parents on my nightstand. I grew up with the memory of a bird tattoo burned into my mind. And I grew up understanding something that most people never learn until much later. The justice system doesn't always deliver justice. I was quiet as a teenager, thoughtful, observant in the way that trauma makes you observant. I noticed details about people, the way they moved, the way they lied, the way their eyes shifted when they weren't being truthful. I became brilliant at school. My parents, Robert and Michelle, encouraged every interest. "You can be whatever you want to be," Michelle would say. But I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone who paid attention. I wanted to be someone who remembered. I wanted to be someone who could prove that the bird tattoo mattered. I went to college and studied business administration with a minor in criminal justice. I took jobs that taught me about people, retail, customer service, administrative work. I was building a skill set, the ability to observe, to document, to remember patterns, the ability to blend in, the ability to wait.
I didn't know who the man with the bird tattoo was, but I knew that one day, if I was patient enough, if I was smart enough, I would find him, and when I did, I would know him. When I turned 26, I took a job as an executive assistant at a law firm in downtown Philadelphia. The job was easy, the pay was good. My boss, Mr. Marcus Reid, was the kind of man that people respected immediately. He was in his late 50s, distinguished, successful, the partner of the firm. He was kind to me, not in an inappropriate way, just kind. He asked about my life. He remembered details about conversations we'd had weeks earlier. He was the type of man that people trusted, the type of man that people didn't look too closely at. I had worked there for 3 months when it happened. It was November, raining hard. Mr. Reid had gone out for a lunch meeting and come back soaking wet. His car had broken down 3 blocks away, and he'd had to run back to the office in the downpour. "Is there somewhere I can dry off?" he asked. "There's a fireplace in the conference room," I said. He nodded and headed there. 10 minutes later, he called for me. "Jasmine, can you bring me the Henderson file? I need it signed by the end of the day." Henderson. My father's name. My last name. I felt something shift in my chest, a tightness, a vibration, but I pushed it down. I got the file. I walked toward the conference room. When I arrived, Mr. Reid was sitting in front of the fireplace, his shoes and socks removed, his feet extended toward the warmth. And there, on his ankle, on the inside of his ankle, right above where the sock line would be, was a bird. Black ink, sharp wings, a bird in mid-flight, the exact same tattoo I'd seen 18 years earlier. The world didn't stop spinning. That's something movies get wrong. The world keeps spinning. It's just that you stop spinning with it. You become very still, very cold, very focused. I placed the file on his desk. "Is there anything else you need, Mr. Reid?" I asked, and my voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. "No, thank you, Jasmine. That's all." I walked out of the conference room, and I closed the door, and I stood in the hallway, and I realized I had found him. For 3 days, I did nothing. I went to work, I did my job, I watched Mr. Reid, and I thought about what I could do with this knowledge. I could go to the police. I could tell them that I worked for a man whose tattoo matched the description I had given 18 years ago. They would laugh at me, or worse, they would investigate him, find nothing but a tattoo, and then he would know that someone was coming for him. I needed proof. Real proof. Proof that would stand up in court. I made a decision that day that changed everything. I decided to confront him, but not directly, not immediately. I decided to recreate the scenario, to see if I could get him to confess, to get him on tape. I decided to do something that I had never thought I was capable of. I decided to hunt. It took me 2 weeks to figure out how to do it. First, I had to get him alone. That was easy. My job gave me access to his schedule. Second, I had to get him to talk about that night. That was harder. Third, I had to record it. That was the hardest part. I researched voice recorders. I bought one, small, digital, capable of capturing clear audio. I hid it in a book on the shelf in his office. And then I waited. I went into his office on a rainy afternoon. "Mr. Reid," I said, "can I ask you something personal?" He looked up from his work. "Of course." "I'm sorry, I have this thing where I notice details, and I noticed it when you were drying off by the fire." He relaxed slightly. "Oh, well, it's been with me for a long time. I got it when I was younger. Seemed like a good idea at the time." "What made you get it?" I pressed. And I watched his face carefully. "I'm sorry, Jasmine, I'm not sure why this matters," he said. And there was something different in his voice now, something cautious. "It doesn't," I said quickly. "I was just curious." I left his office, but I knew I knew that he was wondering. Over the next few weeks, I changed tactics. I started leaving newspaper clippings on his desk, old ones from the archive. Local teacher and nurse killed in home invasion. Case remains unsolved 18 years later. I would leave them in different places, on his chair, on his desk, in his inbox. I never said anything about them. I just made sure he knew I had put them there. I could see him getting more and more anxious. On a Sunday, I drove to his neighborhood. I posted a single flyer on a telephone pole directly across from his house. We know who the killer is. Justice is coming. I didn't leave any other details, just those words, and I watched from my car as he found it the next morning while getting his newspaper. I watched his hands shake as he tore it down. I watched him look around, trying to figure out who was watching him, trying to figure out if his secret was still a secret. I started mailing him letters, just one sentence each. We know what you did. The bird remembers. Confession is coming. I mailed them from different post offices. I wore gloves. I was careful. But the message was clear. He was not safe. I watched him deteriorate. At work, he became paranoid. He would look at people on the street like they might be coming for him. He stopped leaving his house except for work. He hired a security company. He started checking his locks obsessively. And I watched it all, knowing that every day I was getting closer to the truth. 3 months after I saw the tattoo, Mr. Reid called me into his office. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Jasmine," he said, "we need to talk about something serious." My heart was pounding, but I kept my expression neutral. "Of course," I said. "It's been getting messages," he said carefully. "Threats. Someone seems to know something about my past." I said nothing. "And I'm tired. I'm so tired of being afraid." He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the real man underneath the successful lawyer, the man who had been running for 18 years. "I think it's time I told the truth." He didn't know it at the time, but I had activated my phone's voice recorder before I came into his office. I sat there and I listened while he confessed. He told me about needing money for gambling debts, about breaking into houses, about the night he came to my parents' house and they had confronted him, about how it had escalated, about how he had panicked, about how my parents had died because he was afraid. And he cried. This successful lawyer, this man that everyone respected, cried in his office while confessing to murder. I kept my phone recording the entire time. I gave the recording to the police. They were shocked. A full confession, clear audio, a lawyer admitting to crimes he had committed 18 years ago. Mr. Marcus Reid was arrested. The case, which had been cold for so long, suddenly was very hot. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The confession was damning. He pleaded guilty. The judge sentenced him to life in prison. When the news broke, when every media outlet reported that the Henderson murders had been solved, people wanted to know who had found the evidence. The police explained that they had received an anonymous recording, but Mr. Reid knew. When they brought him into the station, when he realized he had confessed on my phone, when he understood what had happened, he asked for me. "I want to see Jasmine Henderson," he said. And I went to the station, and I stood on one side of the glass, and he sat on the other side in his prison orange. And he said, "It was you all along, the letters, the posters, the articles." "Yes," I said simply. "You were a child under the bed," he said, "and you remembered." "Yes," I said, "I remembered." "How did you know it was me?" he asked. "The bird," I said. "The tattoo on your ankle. I saw it the night you killed my parents, and I saw it again 18 years later in the conference room. That's all I needed." He looked broken, completely broken. "I've been waiting for this," he said quietly, "for someone to remember, for someone to come for me." "I'm not here to hurt you," I said. "I'm here because justice matters, because my parents' lives mattered, because details matter." The case became a news story. The police got credit for solving it, but the truth, that a woman had spent years observing, remembering, and patiently hunting the man who killed her parents, that truth lived in the details. My adoptive parents, Robert and Michelle, sat in the front row of the courtroom every single day. "We're so proud of you," Michelle said when it was over, and I realized something. I had taken what was stolen from me, and I had gotten it back. Not my parents. Nothing could bring them back, but I had gotten the truth. I had gotten justice. I had gotten closure. If you are listening to this story, I want you to understand something fundamental. Trauma teaches you to pay attention in ways that most people never learn. I saw a bird tattoo for 3 seconds in the dark when I was 9 years old, and 18 years later, that detail was what solved a murder. That detail saved justice. My father used to say that history was made up of details, that the small things, a date, a name, a location, those were what proved that a moment had happened. I carried that lesson with me. I noticed that the man in the conference room had a tattoo. I noticed the shape of it. I noticed the angle of it. I remembered. And remembering, in a world where people forget, can be a superpower. People ask me if it was hard to wait so long, if it was hard to go to work every day and see the man who had killed my parents, if it was hard not to confront him immediately. And the answer is yes. But I learned something from my parents in the months before their death. Patience is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. My mother was patient. She spent her life in a difficult job, helping people, waiting for nothing but the satisfaction of having done right. My father was patient. He taught history not because it was flashy, but because he believed that eventually people would understand. So I was patient, and patience paid off. These words were spoken to me so many times when I was a child that they became part of my DNA. Jasmine, every action ripples forward. You do something today, and it affects tomorrow, and the day after that, and 20 years after that. He was talking about schoolwork, about homework, about the importance of doing things right even when no one was watching, but those words became the foundation of what I did, because I understood that justice is not immediate. Justice is a ripple that starts when you notice a detail and remember it, that ripples forward when you refuse to forget, that becomes a wave when you finally act. Pay attention, my father also said, because you never know what detail might matter someday. I listened. I paid attention, and it took 18 years, but the detail mattered. This story is about many things. It is about loss. It is about waiting. It is about the power of a single detail, a bird tattoo on an ankle that changed everything. But more than anything, it is about understanding that justice doesn't always come fast. Sometimes it comes slow. Sometimes it comes quietly. Sometimes it comes from an unexpected person, a girl who was hiding under a bed, who saw something no one else could see, who remembered when everyone else forgot. The man who killed my parents didn't get away with it, not because of DNA, not because of eyewitnesses, not because of obvious evidence, but because a child noticed something small and an adult refused to let that detail disappear. That is the real victory. Not revenge, not violence, but the simple, powerful act of remembering and using that memory to bring truth into the light.